Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Backyard Angling. You're watching our Bugs and Brews fly tying series. And before I get into it, Bugs and Brews is going to be kind of some of our supplemental fly tying content. We're also going to be posting these videos to our second YouTube channel, Bugs and Brews, and I'll leave a link in the video description to that channel if you wanted to check that out. In this series, we hope to share some of the different patterns that we use and maybe talk a little bit on flies, why we like certain flies, and talk a little bit of beer too. So if that's something that interests you, be sure to check out that other channel. So in the last video we posted, Dan is fishing in and around the Yellowstone region. So it seems fitting to crack open a public landowner pale ale, which is a beer brewed in Montana in collaboration with backcountry hunters and anglers. So we're going to enjoy that as we tie up a couple of $3 dips. So for the $3 dip, I like to tie those pretty small. I use a Lively Legs lip splitter, number 135, size 18. Works pretty well, but you could really use any scud hook. I'd say probably 16 to 20 would be a good size range. I tie a couple of these in 20s, a couple in 18s. I don't get much bigger than 18. I like them pretty small. And for thread, I'm going to be using UTC Ultra Thread and Rusty Brown and 70 denier. And we'll start right behind the bead here, which is a tungsten bead in 5/64. You can use a brass bead. That's going to work pretty well also, because this is something that generally I'll fish a little higher in the water column, whether it is as a dropper on my nymph rig or on a dry dropper rig. Take the thread whole way to the rear of the hook there, and then back front, making some touching wraps as we go. And for the wire, I have extra small gold wire. I'm just kind of matching the bead here. That's just kind of my own personal preference. If you were using a copper bead, you could use copper wire, silver bead, silver wire. That's just what I like to do. And we'll tie that wire in, making touching wraps the whole way back to where our thread started, or ends rather. And then touching wraps back forward. This is going to build up our body a little bit, give us a kind of a taper for a more natural look. So as I was wrapping a lot, my thread, as you can kind of see on the video there, is starting to cord up. So what I'll do is I'll give it a counterclockwise spin with this UTC thread. That's going to kind of furl it out, make it a little flatter. And then whenever I'm tying and making my taper, it's going to be slightly smoother. So I'm going back about 2/3 of the way, and then touching wraps back up. And then I'm going about 1/3 of the way, touching wraps back up. That gives us a decent enough taper there, in my opinion. I'm not too picky with that. And then I'm going to rib this fly. And I like to counter rib it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap this in the opposite direction that I was wrapping my thread, just to be sure that that real thin wire doesn't get down between any thread wraps. You don't have to do it this way, but this is just my own personal preference. I'll give it 2 thread wraps there to capture that wire. Lock it in with a couple of front wraps. And for our wing, we have bleached elk hair. And I'm not taking a lot. That's one thing with this fly. You can be pretty conservative with. I got about 20 or so hairs. Not a ton, as you can see. But you can also see that there's a lot of those fuzzies in there. So what I'm going to do is try and get out as much as I can with my fingers. Then I'll take a comb and just brush all that junk out. This being a nymph, it's not as critical to actually do that. It's just kind of a pet peeve of mine. I don't like that stuff in there. So what I'll do here is I'm kind of pinching this. I got my fingers and just putting it right behind the bead. And then all I'm doing is just 1, 2 really light wraps. And I'm making sure that that hair doesn't rotate to the front of the hook. And then I'll bring my bobbin back up behind, and I'm going to pull with upward thread tension there. And once I have that kind of secured, I'm going to be wrapping forward through those butt ends. And all that's going to do is just really make sure that this is locked in place. I give about 3 or 4 turns up. And now I'm going to give a little bit of a whip finish to almost finish this fly off. We still got to give it a haircut. Give it 2 whip finishes to really lock that in. And we can cut our thread. And at this point, what I'm going to do is kind of separate out those butt ends like that. Now this isn't super critical. You don't have to make sure that you're separating out every single butt end because you got to cut the wing in the back. But these I'm going to cut flush. So we'll see if we can. One straggler there. We got that front cut off flush, and now for the back, for that back wing, about 1/2 to 1/4 length of the body is what I like. And that looks like it's just about perfect for my tastes. And that's all there is to the $3 dip. So that's all there is to it. It's a really easy fly, quick to tie. You can crank a bunch of these out, and it's super effective. It's really good though too that you can crank them out as fast as you can, because I tend to lose these. I fish them on a lot of dry dropper rigs on a really light tippet. That way that fly off of that dropper is getting down really quick. The deer hair gives a little bit of floatability. That's why I like the tungsten, but you can definitely use brass, especially if you find that the fish are feeding in a little bit of a higher section of the water column, or maybe fishing some slower water there where you have time for that thing to really get down. But it's a great fly because it's so nondescript. I think that's why it is so effective on pressured waters. It's performed well for me in the past. And as for the beer, this is from Highland Brewing. It's an American pale ale, and I think it's fantastic for things like this. It was actually brewed for different hunters and anglers to be kind of like a light, crushable thing. So it's perfect for tying up a bunch of flies, perfect for a day out on the water. And part of the proceeds of this beer, since it was brewed in collaboration with backcountry hunters and anglers, go to federal land protection. So go out, fish your $3 dips out on federal land, and enjoy a nice cold beer on the water. Until next time, tie one on.